and welcome to the House of Kanaz. As I'm recording this is May 24th. It is 11:12 p.m. And what is going on astrologically at the moment is we are one day away from the uh, exactitude of the Mars square Pluto aspect. And I've talked about this before in other episodes. I believe episode 5, I went through a history. And lately, like this is a fairly common aspect. And the last time that we had this was just a few months ago. So it's, again, it happens every couple of months, but this is one of the aspects that I have been tracking because whenever it occurs, there is more violence in the world. And in particular, it has often signaled an increased amount of tension in the current conflict with Iran. And there has been a lot that has been going on this weekend. So, and I don't know, like I haven't looked at the news in a few hours, so I don't know if something has changed. However, there was an attack at the White House yesterday. And again, that kind of signals this type of Mars square energy. Mars is about aggression, it's about how we go through the world. Pluto is our trauma, our shit, the underbelly of society. And so, in the mundane world, whenever these planets are making a hard aspect to each other, so either they're 0 degrees away, 90 degrees away, or 180 degrees away, those in particular are times where there is just more violence out in the world. And the notes that I made in my little book since 2023, with the start of the conflict with Gaza, this aspect has always been activated. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, what's going on this weekend is there's like a plant in LA that is there's like either two options. One, I think it's gonna explode. I think it's like the likelihood that what's going to happen, and they don't know the direction, but it looks like it's going to be a huge environmental disaster. Also in LA, there's like a huge oil leak somewhere. So LA is having a lot of issues. And then I think it was 2 days ago or 3 days ago, there was an explosion of a car. It was a pretty big explosion in New York City outside of Wall Street. So again, all of this energy of like explosions, guns, that is this type of energy. And tomorrow, or I should say like basically a little past midnight on Tuesday, the 26th. So like I forget, like 12:05 or somewhere around there. That's when it becomes exact. But what we have been witnessing the past few days is the buildup of this energy. So I would not be surprised if something even larger, not necessarily even larger, but just like another news thing happens Memorial Day or the Tuesday, even like throughout the week. I feel like there's a good possibility of that. And just to say a, a few thoughts. One is I've been tracking when Mars makes any of these hard aspects to any planet that is beyond Saturn or beyond. So Mars and Saturn, Mars and Neptune, Mars and Uranus, Mars and Pluto. Whenever it's making either a conjunction where it's at the same point, whether it's a square, it's a 90 degrees, or an opposition 180 to any of those planets, that usually is a difficult period. And depending on how those planets are configured, can also tell us something. So and to that point, what I've mentioned in other episodes in the past is July 4th is when Mars meets up with Uranus. That is very unexpected booms. Okay, like that. Do not be in a major city. Do not be in DC or New York or LA. Like if you have the ability not to be in a major public gathering space, I would not be there. I feel like that energy on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, given the state of the country and how everything feels so tense, I don't think it's wise to put yourself at risk. I'm not. I'm being very judicious with how I go about moving throughout the world at the moment. And I am using astrology as a tool to determine when things are less tense to travel and to go out in more public areas. And that may sound crazy. It's the experiment that I'm having at the moment. And given the events of late, I feel like again, there's evidence that this tool can be quite useful in protecting yourself. So that's how I'm using it. Um, and I okay, let's just go down this path because the war in Iran, the way that I see it being portrayed in American news, most Americans are not aware that a lot of our bases in the Middle East have been destroyed. This war is costing us billions. Like at one point, the estimate was 2 billion a day, but we have yet to really account for all of the damage, physical damage to the bases in that area, not to mention all of the economic damage that we have done. Okay. Yesterday, I went to the farmer's market. I bought two bunches of bananas and one bunch of asparagus. It cost me $9. Okay. I got 10 bananas and a bundle of asparagus. That is now $9. Just a few years ago, I could pay $5 for that. And, I went to the grocery store here and there were boxes of cereal for 7.50, just like a single box that just a few years ago was $4. Now it's $7. And everything is going to become more expensive. I had predicted this before, but again, I want to reiterate it because you have to think about how you're going to navigate this. Things are going to get so expensive that it's never really wise, let's say, to go out a lot to eat at restaurants. It's a nice luxury, but that's going to become more and more of a luxury because prices are going to continue to rise. And you're going to really need to go back to some of the strategies that you had during COVID and start making bread or doing more home cooked meals. I think that's going to be really essential. I have for a decade done CSAs, the community supported agriculture. And what that means is every summer I give, like in the winter, I give X amount of dollars to a farm and I get a box of vegetables every week or every other week, however, I set up the CSA. And I think that's going to be really essential just because it's kind of like locking in food if you're unable to grow things. If you can grow things, start growing things, plant things, experiment, because I don't think this is going to be a short term thing. I think that this is going to continue on. Farmers are not planting as much as they did previously because they don't have as much access to fertilizer given the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So again, there's this fertilizer crisis, which is going to affect food. And this is kind of like slowly rolling out, but we have to understand the dominoes that are in place. And even if a domino hasn't fallen, it's just only a matter of time. Okay. And things are going to become more and more expensive. If like my freezer is stocked, I stocked it this past winter. I stocked it with a lot of meat, chicken, um, just protein. My pantry is stocked. I have a lot of whole grains, quinoa, couscous, rice, whatever. Stock things up. Get whole grains, get canned beans. Like every time I go to the grocery store, I just buy cans. And that's been my pattern for the past year because I've been thinking about this for a while. So for the past year, every time I go to the grocery store, I just buy like two or three more cans that I normally would need. But that's been able, I've been able to accumulate um, a good amount of food that, if need be, I could survive um, more than just a few weeks. So keep that in mind. I do like what I'm worried about. This is where I see things going. This is kind of like worst case scenario, which is I see the war in Iran escalating, and I do see us getting kind of trapped there. I don't think that Iran is going to really come to a deal unless there is a change in leadership in America. I think that's the concession that they're after. So, what does that mean? Um, I think that this war is going to continue because, well, the people in power don't want to give up power, right? So there's this power game. And what I've been thinking about is this is my prediction at the moment is that it's going to be very similar to what happened in Russia during World War One, where it's out fighting, and then all of a sudden there's a civil war. And I think that the war in Iran is going to lead to a civil war. And I've tried to have this conversation about a civil war with people for like more than a decade. Like since the whole Tea Party thing and the rise of Fox News, I've been really worried about this. And every year, I just feel like it's getting closer and closer to an inevitability. And I don't see how a nation can function if we don't know what truth is. If we are, if one segment of the population believes that it's fighting a Christian crusade at the moment to bring about Jesus and the second coming. And the other segment does not subscribe to that belief of Christian Zionism, And I think that that's something fundamental. And we have different news agencies depending on your belief, even though there's somewhat of a convergence that's been going on in regards to the dampening of what is actually discussed on a lot of American news channels. So I think that with the rising prices, right, where I live, again, as I'm filming this, I was out driving today and the gas prices are 4.57 where I live. And at the start of the year, it was like 3.40. I think it even got down to like 3.25 at some point. So that's a huge increase. And again, there's no stopping it. Again, because even if America is producing oil, that oil is not like state controlled. It's part of the global economy. And so as the price of oil increases globally, of course, oil companies are going to sell the oil to the highest bidder. It's like economics. So we are paying the price of this diminished oil supply. And you see countries taking measures like in Europe, they are cutting flights internally and they are favoring flights that are international or transatlantic because yeah, that's the priority at the moment. But many flights that are within the boundary of the EU, they're getting canceled because there's a fuel shortage for oil shortage for jet fuel. So the economy is slowly shrinking in a similar way that we experienced in COVID, except this has been man made. This is man made. And I just don't like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, it should be clear to the people who are in power that certain points, like that this would happen, that of course Iran would retaliate and close the strait because it has been disconnected from the global economy for decades. And so this is an excellent strategy on their part to exert damage on it. It's like a David and Goliath type of situation. So I'm not optimistic of this war. And I do think that like what is happening in America is slowly everything is getting hollowed out. And government funding is just, like, does FEMA even exist at the moment? I don't think it does. So there's less government support for climate catastrophes or disasters in general. And as we have climate change every summer, it's going to be more and more taxing. There's going to be stronger hurricanes. There's going to be heat waves that affect the electrical grid. And all of this is connected that the systems are going to be strained. I really think that we're going to see soon enough that the government cannot supply, how do I say this, the resources and the infrastructure of the government won't be able to really address the needs of people at the moment. Like, who knows what's going to go on in LA, but I will be surprised if there's government assistance. I mean, like there wasn't even government assistance with the fires that they had last year. They're still trying to get money. So that I just, and on top of that, you have the insurance companies that are slowly backing away from places like California and Florida. There's certain areas in which you cannot get your house insured. And so those people are going to have a very difficult time if they try to sell their house. They won't be able to sell their house because the house can't be insured. And it's going to cause this like migration crisis. Like, I really do think that I don't know the speed that this is going to happen. Worst case scenario, it all happens all at once. And really systems break down and there's chaos. And I worry about that option. And this is where like why I selected to live in upstate New York is because I've been planning for these shifts. I think that upstate New York is a great place given the climate change that when you look at the models of how much the water, the sea levels are going to rise, and given how the temperatures are going to be changing over the next few decades, upstate New York is going to be rather comfortable. So that's why like I like made this change just because I do think that many places that are quite popular will become uninhabitable, either from infrastructure breaking down or a major natural disaster coming in and not having the resources to rebuild. And really, as opposed to what's happening in the Netherlands, for instance, where they are um, building canals and building structures to help deal with the rising sea level. We're not doing that in America. We're acting like children and trying to pretend as if that's not going to happen. Just like as if the crisis in Iran won't affect us. It's the same mentality. And I do think that what we are going through at the moment is growing pains. I do think that it's kind of like someone who's on a bender, someone who is doing really bad, right? Sometimes they have to crash out in order for them to learn the lesson. I really don't think that someone stepping in before the person is ready, that's going to cause more issues, in my opinion. I think that you need to let people feel pain. And I really think that that's my mindset at the moment. Like we are on a crash course and this is our karma. This is what we deserve because we refuse to be adults and take the initiative. The people in power refuse to be mindful and take initiative of the future. And instead of preparing for the inevitable climate crisis that is approaching us, instead of preparing for this, we are spending and adding so much to our deficit that it's going to be impossible to pay off. And I had this realization it's not really a realization, it's kind of obvious, but how so I was on TikTok and I got on this loop, this feed of students who had recently graduated college showing their student loan amount. Many of these videos, they had been paying off their loans, but I think because they've been only paying off the minimum amounts, and because their base amount was so much, it was like in the six figures, that they basically were maintaining the amount. They were essentially just paying off interest as it was accruing. And I think that the US government essentially has indebted a generation, in that it is like Gen Z and Gen Alpha who, unfortunately, if you go to college without scholarship or without being able to pay it, as you're, if you're not rich or whatever, you don't have a scholarship, you're basically signing up, you're handing, you're giving the government like whatever money it is, let's say $100,000, $120,000, right? And then on top of that, you are giving the government interest on that. So like every student basically just becomes a money-making machine for the government. And in some ways, the realization that I had was like, for large swaths of the population, you either don't have money and you're going to college and the government's going to get 100, 200 grand out of you, or you also don't have money, but you go and you become a soldier so that you can use the was it the GI Act or whatever to go, have the government pay for your college. But in either way, you are giving up part of your life or your life for the government to go to fucking war. It like it's so nihilistic just to think like every person's either getting loans or going into service, and I I yeah, it's I do think that the younger generation, as things become more expensive, and if they are stuck in debt, like there's no way out, that's going to be a populace that is not going to be happy. And that's where I think the Civil War aspect is going to come from, right? It's going to come from that population who has been really disenfranchised and doesn't have many opportunities. And then, not to add, on top of that, you have AI taking over jobs. You have AI who, you've gone to school for whatever field, and now AI is taking that over, or you have to learn AI to do that field now or something. So it's it's so many stressors that I don't see how we don't end up in a civil war. I don't. I want to be wrong. I want to think, oh, we'll be I we'll be able to vote this out. I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think that we're past that point. And on top of like how Elon, I mean, I don't even want to go down this route, but who knows the security also of our elections. That's something to think about. But again, I think that we are at this point in which there's so much tension in the world. And it is crazy that, okay, like after the the third attack on the president that happened last month, um, within a day, within a few hours, people started questioning reality. And it is like, okay, was that real or not? Does it even matter? And now with this thing that happened yesterday, I mean, like we've moved on. It's crazy that in the 90s this would be news for weeks, months. We're past that point. This can't go on indefinitely. And also with AI, what I'm really worried about is that it's getting better and better. I'm really worried about election season because, especially in 2028, when the imagery that AI can produce is getting more and more convincing, it is going to be a real fucking struggle to know what is truth. Did that actually happen? And, I was thinking about that today. I was like, well, with the car bomb thing in New York City, I was talking to a friend about it, and it was like, I haven't, he lives in New York City. It was like, I haven't heard about this. It's like, did it even happen? And then I sent him the the report from like NBC. I was like, oh, it did happen. And then so I was thinking about like from one of the things that I'm going to be looking for when I'm critiquing whether it's A or not is whether I can see it from different perspectives. If it's only like one perspective, that may not be convincing anymore. Like to be able to see the car explosion from different angles and for that to be able to provide like a cohesive, comprehensive view of what's going on, I think that's going to be like a higher standard for verification. I think that again, this is going to add more. Things are just going to be more taxing because you're always going to have to discern what is true or not. And we still have to do that on the internet, but I think the amount of this, the amount of questioning of reality is going to be increasing. And I just don't see how um, a society can stay together if we don't know, if we don't agree on what is true. It's one thing to have different religious opinions, but when we don't agree on fundamental things in which we have video evidence of, I think that's a big problem. So uh, that is to start off on a happy note. That's what I'm thinking about. Um, where else do I want to go? Okay, so since I'm on this topic, before I started recording, I was looking at some astrology. So I'm going to share this with you. And if you are watching this, you can hopefully see my screen. And what I was looking at is okay, so like in astrology, any event has an astrological chart. So long as you know like the place and the time and the date, you can make an astrological chart. So this is the chart of the US Constitution. And even though in America we celebrate the 4th of July as like the founding of our country, it's really that the country in which we live in, the structures of it is really dictated by the US Constitution, which wasn't signed until 1787. Even though we focus on 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. It's really 1787 with the signing that the the philosophical construction of how the governments of America operates really took effect, essentially. And what I'm not going to focus, I could do like a complete different episode, just like reading this chart. And if you're interested in my analysis of that, let me know. But the thing that I was looking at were the transits. So, like where the planets are in the sky at the moment and how they relate to the US Constitution chart. And this is what I am focused on. So, Uranus, just let me see, just 2 months ago, moved into the fourth house of the US Constitution chart. The fourth house is kind of the root, it's the base of the country in this chart. It is the foundations of the country. So Uranus being there is really shaking up our foundations. It is really going to be causing some shifts. And again, as I mentioned in previous episodes, we are in this cycle that whenever Uranus has been in Gemini, so like the last one was World War II, the time before that was the Civil War, and so forth. It's always been in the fourth house during that transit. So again, it's affecting America from on a fundamental level. And on the 4th of July, I change this. So it's going to be the 4th of July when we have this conjunction of Uranus and Mars. So Mars is meeting up with Uranus in the fourth house of the US Constitution chart. And so this is the first time in this go around where that conjunction is happening in the fourth house of this chart, which is making me think like this is going to be really fundamental. It's going to be shifting. It's going to, initiate a shift in the foundations of America. The thing that I'm also looking at in this chart is Pluto. And essentially, whatever chart that you're looking at, whether it's your own birth chart or some other, the whenever the like outer planets, so I really focus on Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, whenever they're making significant aspects to the base chart, that's a time of note. So here we are experiencing Pluto conjuncting the ascendant, and Pluto moves very slow. Okay, so it's going to be kind of approaching the ascendant this year and next year. So like in 2027, it gets almost like a degree away. And it's not until 2028 that it starts crossing that boundary. And it will cross it a few times while Uranus is still in the fourth house. So I really think that 2028 is going to be difficult. I see things escalating in America. I don't see things getting easier with these aspects. Whenever Pluto is making a significant aspect to your chart, it is often a difficult time. Okay. And I don't see, if this US chart is indeed a good representation of America, I don't see this being easy. We also, again, to talk about outer planets, uh, we also have Neptune during this time will be in the second house of values, of how we relate to security. And with Neptune there, there's confusion. It's like, what do we stand for? What are our beliefs? What do we value? There is uncertainty there. So we're going through something in which we are confused in our value system, our financial system is obfuscated. We're a little bit delusional in that regard. Again, I think that this is like the stock market at the moment, I think is really unreliable. I don't see how we are at 50,000 on the Dow. Like, to me, given everything that is happening, I don't see how it doesn't crash. And during the time that Neptune is in that second house, which it will be in there for like at least a decade, I do think that there's going to be a major crash there. And I think that that whole AI business, it's going to be similar to like the dot com in the late 90s, where like there's a dot com crash. I think all these businesses that are trying to plant their flag on AI and offer AI everything, like there's so many AI companies. I think that there's gonna things are may take a year or two. Maybe it won't be until this 2028, but I think it's going to come sooner. A lot of those businesses are going to collapse. And I just see, similar to like the phone industry, like different companies buying out one another. And then, just because that's how our systems have worked for so long, where there's then just like two or three, if not one main competitor. So the astrology does also suggest that this is not going to be an easy time. Like the next few years are not going to be easy. And we have to be okay with that. We don't have to be okay with that, but we have to understand that that's what we are going to be dealing with and that you need to prepare appropriately. Because again, I think what we are going through at the moment, it reminds me so much of COVID, of like the news and many people are trying to keep this narrative that things are normal. There's going to become a point where people are collectively going to recognize that things are not normal. And once they realize that, it's going to be similar to COVID, where there's going to be like pandemonium in stores, pandemonium in public settings. I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. A worst case scenario. Okay. And the reason why I lean towards this is that I just don't have a lot of faith in the people who hold power. And that's why I think things are going to get a lot worse. Not to mention, I didn't even mention, we have hantavirus, we have Ebola happening. So remember that we're still under this like Saturn Neptune conjunction. This is the vibe, right? So Saturn and Neptune, similar to Saturn and Pluto, can bring about or signal viruses, viruses of the blood. And those two things also, if they get worse, our healthcare system hasn't recovered. And on top of that, talking about hollowing out, like the CDC has been hollowed out. So you think that the CDC has the infrastructure to track hantavirus efficiently or track Ebola? No, like it, so many institutions have been dismantled. And sure, they may have a name, like the CDC building still exists, but it is not providing the service that it once did because its funding has been stripped. Just like the consequences of US aid, and how that is affecting, Africa and so forth, and the consequences of that. Those consequences are not immediate. Those consequences take time to to materialize. And so it's only going to get worse. Like those, you can't take away those systems of aid and then think that that's not going to affect those communities, which then, because we're in a global economy, will inevitably affect us, either through travel or trade or whatever. It's inevitable. And I, I'm just a ball of sunshine today, but I'm getting it out. And the thing that I have been afraid of, the thing I think about a lot, amongst other things, is this. I've spent many years trying to think about an exit plan. And many nights of like, oh, can I get, how easy is it to get uh, citizenship in another country? And I've looked at a lot of my options. I worry that at some point we just might not even be able to travel. Like if there's limited jet fuel, if the price of travel goes up, if borders close because things become very chaotic, at some point you have to come to terms with your decisions and really sit down with like, what is your game plan? What, how are you going to navigate things? And again, we only know what we know. But I do think it's important to be realistic with yourself because like the news isn't going to give you this information, right? Like this is why there was that panic during COVID because people weren't paying attention to international news and they weren't stocking up and they weren't preparing. And so many people were just caught off guard that, when the president gave his speech on March 13th or whatever, many people were not paying attention. And that's why there was that chaos. And I do think that it's a similar thing where because because our perception shapes our reality. And the news for many people is how they are informed. And when I say news, I just mean like the Today Show, let's say, some mainstream broadcast. And if you're not taking the time to even look at like BBC or, some international news outlets, it's very possible that you're not aware of all the things that are happening. So I think it's really good to just keep that in mind, educate yourself, look at different news sources. Um, yeah. Okay. The other thing that I want to talk about before I give my card reading, there's a few things. Um, in my notebook, before I started this, I wrote the word aliens. So I want to talk about aliens. And first, I want to talk about, again, what happened in February with the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune. So that was at 0 degrees Aries. And I always viewed that conjunction as like a reset button was being pressed. And because Aries is the start of the zodiac, to have it at 0 degrees, to have it at the first, the beginning of the zodiac, to have this conjunction in which Neptune is about ideals, it's about dreams, it's glamour, it's image, uncertainty, can also be, addictions, escapism, right? It's a lot of these Pisces aspects. And you have Saturn, which is stuck in the 3D. It is uh, the material world. It is structures. So together, either the sea is washing away structures, or Neptune is imagining, and the Saturn is bringing in, manifesting that dream. And again, with it happening at 0 degrees, to me, I always viewed that as like, this is the start of, this is like a paradigm shift. This is the start of a paradigm shift. Okay. And there have been a lot of documents that, there have been documents, there's been hearings around alien or UAP disclosures. And this is something, again, like the mainstream media is not talking about. But if you watch some of these congressional hearings, and they've been having hearings for the past few years, right? And this information gets out. And I think that this is something that I've been thinking about. And again, I have not spoken about this out loud. So this might be a topic for another episode. But when I think about aliens, I have always thought that they exist. Because when I think about it from a mathematical standpoint, we only know the universe in the way that we perceive it, in the amount that our technology can perceive it, right? And so we can't, it is impossible to know infinity. We don't know infinity. We can't go infinitely in space. So to me, because space is infinite, because space is expanding, how, like, the likelihood that we are all by ourselves, to me, is zero. I don't buy that we are all by ourselves. I don't buy it. I think that there must be, given all of the stars, all of the things, um, that there is life. Now, what you define as life, that's a whole nother thing, right? Do I think that there's exact replicas of humans? Not necessarily. But do I think that there is intelligence? It, to me, I have a hard time believing that there's not. I've never believed that there's not something there. That has always been something that, just mathematically, I think that, like, it's impossible that we are the only ones. And I think that's kind of selfish, for humans, like how humans think that, like, they're on the top the animal pyramid, of the food chain, right? This like, oh, like this Christian sentiment of like, oh, we're here to steward the animals. Like, fuck you. Like, who like the selfishness, this egoism of like, we're the best, we're on top. Says who, right? What if there's aliens above us? We think that we're on top, but what if there's something else above us? I'm not saying there is, but like the ego that we have, that we think that we are on the top of the universe, is pretty fucking spectacular. It's kind of like when people imagine God, they imagine him as a person, because their identity, or the way that they are perceiving some role in authority is of like an older white male figure or whatever, right? And what's why should God be a human? So, aliens. One conspiracy theory that I've been thinking about is, okay, if they exist, and if the government knows that they exist, this would disrupt the whole world order, in that it would, I think, really cause conflict in many people who subscribe to an organized religion. In that many people believe that there's a God watching over them and judging them and whatever, right? And it's very different if you're like, there's really, aliens are also part of this world. It's very similar to when Copernicus discovered that the Earth is going around the sun, and the sun is not revolving around the Earth, right? That was a whole paradigm shift, which consequently kicked astrology out of academia. But this shift of, if aliens exist and therefore our governments are not as powerful or in control that we give them, that we perceive, and also there's these forces that are influencing, or have the ability to influence, or don't follow the uh, constrictions of human society. I think a lot of people would struggle with that. I think it would be, again, mass panic. And so, connected to that, my mind is just going all places. Connected to that, Epstein files. What connection am I making? I really think that the Epstein files is also a great representation of the Saturn Neptune of it all, just because it is like, what is truth? And is it that all these people in power are really okay supporting such rancid behavior? Everything is so corrupt. And if you don't see it, you can live, your life and uh, not be involved in it. But if you do see it, if you become cognizant and nothing happens, are you complicit? So anyway, I think the Epstein files, I think aliens, and those files, that UAP files that are being released and discussed, because the whole thing with like, just like a few weeks ago when they asked Obama about aliens, and he had said yes, and then Trump said like he just revealed classified information. He shouldn't have done that, blah blah blah. Like, I don't think that they're lying. Like, I think, unless you think that aliens are a psyop. But again, I go back to the mathematical argument that I do believe that there are there's an impossibility that we are by ourselves in the whole universe, that we are by ourselves. I don't buy that. And I'm going to try to connect this to something that happened today. Okay. Because around this whole topic of spirituality, I think at the end of the day, it is about understanding your truth, understanding who you are at like a core level. And so today I was having some breakfast, and I am sometimes working out of this workbook that I'm going to show you called Astrology for Yourself. And this is by Demetra George and Douglas Bloch. And this is, if you know nothing about astrology, this is a fantastic book. And it really forces you to go through your chart, identify each of the placements, and then it gives you keywords given the house and the sign, and how to start interpreting your chart and seeing these different aspects. Anyway, so I was working out of this morning. It's like a Sunday activity. And I was listening to an album that I haven't listened to in many years. And then as it landed on, like, as it was going through the tracks, I was the second to last track, I was like, oh, there's something coming. And the I'm really bad with names of songs, so I'm gonna look this up so I can give you more details. So anyway, I'm listening and I know that the following song is something that's very emotional to me. And it's called Clouds by Bat for Lashes. And I forgot about this song. I've not listened to the song in a very long time, more than 5 years. Anyway, I knew that something was approaching. And I'm working on this book, and I was like, you either have to turn this off or you have to go through this. And I decided I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through this. And again, there's a set of songs that make me cry. And this song certainly is one of them. And I just remember a period of time of like getting over a breakup and listening to this song and driving in dark nights and being alone, and just like that that feeling of loneliness, and feeling like you're doing the right thing, but you're also like by yourself, and you have to just have faith that things will you will be able to transmute this, and you will be able to go through it. But it's this recognition of like, this is difficult. And whenever, like, for me, I went through this period, especially last year, where I created a playlist so I could travel back in time to younger parts of myself, because whatever I'm feeling, like whenever I'm listening to an album, the feelings that I have that I'm going through at that moment, if I resonate with the album, get embedded into the album. And then I don't listen to it once I'm like past that stage. And so the album in some ways becomes enshrined in my music, my like emotional state in a way. Like, and so I can listen to albums and be transported back into time and see memories and have emotions pop up. And so that's what was happening with this song is like I was just basically reliving um dealing with dating life breakups and just this like feeling that I used to have of longing to connect with someone and never feeling like I could truly connect with someone. And that is a feeling that I've just had to learn to live with. And it's still there. There's still sometimes it's not as disabling as it was when I was a teenager or in my 20s, but it's still there. And I felt like this song brought it up. Anyway, so I had this this reaction. Okay. And then I was like, you know what? You're already crying. Why don't you listen to another song that makes you cry? So there's another song that is at an end of an album that when I had my past life regression last year, last summer, I got this album that day. And so I listened to the album, and the past life regression got embedded into one of the songs. So whenever I listen to this song, I get transported back into the the scene in which I am dying and I'm watching myself die of a heart attack on a hill. And I have listened to the song close to 100 times. Okay, but I hadn't listened to it for 3 months or 4 months just because I know how reactive I am to it. And it's a great song if I need to release something. And I was like, we're going through, you know, Mars square Pluto. Pluto, you need to cry it out. You need to either cry it out, you need to shit it out. You need to get the toxins out with Pluto. And I was like, you're going to continue crying. So I put on this track and I have this like little ritual where I'll put the track on. I will go and lie down on my couch. I will cover my eyes and I will be transported back into the scene. And this has been the case for me every time I listen to the song. Anyway, so I set myself up in the couch. I want to say 30 minutes goes by. I'm laying on my couch. And then all of a sudden, I hear two knocks. And I debate for a few seconds, like, because you can see my couch from the front door. It's like, they know, I think they know that I'm here. And so if I stay on the couch, it's going to be weird. So I get up. There's no one there. There's no one at the door. And I go out of the door. There's no one on the road. It was the loudest knock. It was so, it was so present. And it's these things that happen to me. And it is like when I go to bed and I lay down, that is when I start hearing the noise. And I think partly like, so I keep myself busy throughout the day. I'm always doing something, whether it's cooking, working out, cleaning, whatever. There's always something going on. I'm listening to music. So when I am lying down, then I start hearing the creaking. And, there used to be more, it varies throughout my time here. I've been in this house for 5 years. When I moved in, there was always like almost footsteps on the staircase when I would go to bed. I don't hear that anymore, but I will hear occasional creaks that I don't hear unless I quiet down and I'm like going to bed. The other thing, two things. The other thing now is I often will put on like a white noise machine. And this has been helpful just because it's been a way that I can uh, not hear the creaking. But it's really random, but I sometimes will hear conversations through the white noise. I will hear music. So sometimes I hear like jazz music. A few months ago, I heard like alarm, not like school alarm bells, but like fire alarms. And then like the next day was that whole crisis in Puerto Vallarta. So that is something that like I'm noticing that there's some there's something there that I'm still exploring. And I've talked to some of my teachers about this, and it's nice because they are like, yeah, I've had that experience as well. And I've had these experiences all my life. And it's always been disheartening when I'm approaching the subject and the person's already like combating it. Because I think at the moment, like it's so important you have to be open, you have to be receptive. And since my mother died, which we're approaching on 2 years, almost to the dates, uh, since she died, that like opened me up in a way that I did not expect. It's opened up channels, and I don't want to close them. I chose to be busy and figure out a way to provide for myself. And I went to college and got a job, made money. But this has always been the thing that's interested me. Like this whole discovery of the unknown. This is the thing that like I want to do, right? Like this has been the reason why I have ended my relationships is at some point their belief is either I believe, like they don't believe in what I believe in. They don't believe in the possibilities. It's not even possibilities. I do believe that um, there are spirits, there are entities, whatever that you want to call them, that we, with our eyes, are unable to perceive. And the past 2 years, I've kind of, really since COVID, um, I will say there was a little in between time in like 2021, 2022, where it was more social. But really, since my mother's death, it really made me be like, okay, I'm going back to COVID life. And I've really taken a step back in a lot of the socializing that I was doing before because I find that I want to, let's say this, I get really caught up sometimes in the people that I'm with. And I noticed this at a visitor a few months ago. And I did not have stomach problems until he arrived. And I don't know, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I feel like really tense. I feel this pain in my stomach. And then and I felt it for hours. And then at the end of the day, he told me that he has a stomach ache. And I was like, this, and I didn't tell him this, but I was like, this is the problem because I'm so open and I'm still learning how energetically to shield myself. I'm feeling what he's feeling. I'm picking up on it. And this is what happened when my mom died. I felt it. I knew when she died. And I didn't know that she was in the hospital. I didn't know that she was, that that was going to happen. I did not know. But I felt like I was carrying part of her pain. And I felt such a relief. In the past 2 years, there's it's kind of like a flickering of light where I sometimes feel like how I felt before all of this trauma, like when I was like 7 or 8, right? I feel like that age before, like around when I was 10 is when there was like a giant shift in my life, in my family life. And so there's these flickers where I'll feel emotions that I haven't felt in decades. And that's only happened since she passed. And yeah, so anyway, I forget how I got to this other than that knock that was on the door. No one was there. Nothing was there. And I swear that it is when I sit down, when I'm not doing anything, I will. There are beings, there are things, there are entities. I do believe that my mom comes in to my dreams, and every time that she appears, it's very healing. It's very appreciative. Given our relationship, there's been a lot of healing through my dreams with her. And I think that it is all about just what if? What if this is the case? Um, I don't think that we know as much as we think we know. And that's also like from a scientific perspective, from a statistical perspective. Okay, let's talk about statistics for a minute because that is what I do. When you are writing a statistical hypothesis, you have your null hypothesis, you have your alternative hypothesis. When you have your null hypothesis, for instance, if we're doing like a simple t-test, we are saying that the null hypothesis is that the two groups have the same mean, for instance. The alternative is that they are different. Point being is that when you're doing a statistical test, you're testing against the alternative. So we either reject the null hypothesis or we fail to reject the null hypothesis. This is the result of every statistical test that you do. When you are writing up your conclusions, you either say, I reject the null hypothesis, or we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Why I'm saying this is when we're talking about aliens, the null hypothesis is, for instance, aliens don't exist. The alternative is that aliens do exist. We are trying to prove that they exist. So, from a scientific standpoint, if you are a scientist and you are following scientific principles, you can either say that we don't have enough evidence for supporting that aliens exist, or you say we have enough evidence that aliens exist, right? So you either are failing to reject the null hypothesis, and again, the null hypothesis is that aliens don't exist. So you fail to reject, but when you fail to reject, it is not accepting the null hypothesis, right? Like this is stats 101. You're not accepting the null hypothesis. You're failing to reject it. So it's that the alternative still may be true. You just don't have enough evidence for it. And I think that's a really important thing because sometimes people talk as if they are accepting the null hypothesis. That is bad science. That is not how any science is done. Okay. What you are doing is you're perpetrating confirmation bias, which is bad science. Unfortunately, that is the modus operandi of a lot of scientists because recognition of the possibility would really disrupt a lot of things. So it's easier for us to believe this. But again, I always go back to Gödel, right? And in what was it, 20s or 30s, when Gödel's impossibility theorem came out, which basically said that in any numeric axiomatic system, that there will always be things that are true that you cannot axiomatically prove. You cannot prove with your axioms. And so, that's always also in the back of my head of like, there will always be things that we just cannot prove to be true. And I am getting a really large buzz in my right ear, and it just shifted, and that's really weird. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what that was about. And it took me off guard. I've been talking a lot. So why don't we do a card spread? And again, my pattern with this podcast at the moment until I find like this stride at the moment works for me, but I'm still navigating how I want to go forward with this project. It's really good for me to have this monthly as a way to check in with myself and to just like do this. If there was demand, I would do it more often. Um, but I think at the monthly level, it's kind of good, to be honest, because time has passed. We get to see what happens. I get to have my, things accumulate and then we get to talk about it. So I kind of like monthly. But there's questions, there's things that you want me to talk about. There's things that you want to know, or maybe like I love researching. If you're like, oh, you can talk about this and maybe I don't know about it, but I can read a book about it and then give my 2 cents. Let me know. So the buzzing in my ear, I'm still thinking about it as I'm shuffling the cards. But when I had my past life regression done, afterwards, I had you go into like a between lives She brought me to like a between lives point in which during that time my mother came through and my ear also was reacting at that point. And I remember having some reactions then, very physical reactions. So my mom loves coming through because I do think that part of her, like, she wants to be like a spirit guide. And so and the fact that I did my little revisit of of that past life today probably opened up something. Anyway, let's kind of see. I'm going to ask the cards about this. So, what can the cards tell me about the ringing in my ears? I'm going to position this so everything can be seen in case you're watching. Right. So first card. So again, I asked, what could the cards tell me about the ringing in my ear? The first card, death. Okay. So death. Either I'm dying, right? Maybe something's going on, but I read this as um someone who has died is communicating with me. Again, I still think it's my mother. Um, again, death is about transformation. And I think that the ringing of my ears is part of this opening the process that I've been going through and opening myself up to feeling things, to sensing things, and yeah. Um, so we have death. Let's see. The nine of discs, gain. And this is a Saturn in Virgo card. So that's a very much like on this physical plane. This is about achievement. Um, so I see this as a very positive card. I don't see that this is saying that I need to worry, but maybe it's something in which like I'm connecting to my senses and gaining this additional ability or this additional awareness. And then we have the Knight of Dis. And when I look at this knight, he's not moving. He's stable. He is in a good location. The sun is shining on him. Um, there's not action, there's a calmness to this. And when I look at him, he is not in an active pose of defending himself. He is open. And so again, I look at this as a positive card that this knight, and the knight is, you could say, like a lower court card. And so this is someone who is in the process of evolving to a king, and I'm on that journey of becoming more connected. This is kind of my focus at the moment. A lot of my time is spent reading, researching, meditating, and just being open to things. So I think that that's a good reading overall. Okay. It confirms what I'm how I am interpreting this. And if there's particular questions that you want me to ask the cards, feel free to leave a comment. Let me know. I want to now do a spread on the month of June. And overall, after we get through Memorial Day and this Mars square Pluto, I think overall June is, I don't want to say it's common as if like no news is going to happen, but the Mars square Pluto is like the major thing that's happening at the end of May. Most of June is is not at that level of intensity. Okay. So I would say things are more calm, astrologically speaking, on average, but it's the 4th of July, the first week of July. That's when things, again, are going to hit the fan. Shit's going to hit the fan. So I think that this is going to be like, inflation's going to continue, prices are going to continue to increase, I think. Um, we're going to see what happens with the war. I see that there's going to be a flash in the pan. What guidance do you have for the month of June? I have my oracle cards as well, and I'm going to pull as well. All right, let's see what we have. All right, Queen of Discs. So again, the discs deal with the earth plane, material plane. The queen is someone who has reached kind of like a pinnacle, and she's looking back on what she has accomplished. She's looking at the road. So again, I feel like June is going to be calmer astrologically. And when I look at this card, this is kind of like a reflection. We're looking back on where we've been this year, like the things that have changed. So we're kind of like taking stock. Perhaps we're coming to more realization of the path that we have actually gone down. Like we're becoming more aware of, yeah, the path that we just went down. All right. The sun. So the sun, I think this is one of the happier cards. So, you have these like lovely cherubs who are dancing and basking in the warmth of the sun. And yeah, this is a card for celebration. And it is a card. So I'm trying to think about like negative things that I could say just because I feel like the world is a difficult place and thinking about other ways that this could be represented. Maybe this means that things are going to be really hot, right? Like maybe we're going to be entering in a period in which there's going to be like drought, too much sun, for instance. Um, Maybe there's a fireball. We look at this, the sun kind of looks like a fireball. So maybe that is something, or maybe this is bringing to light something, like maybe something that was kept hidden is being shown and things are becoming more clear. That's a possibility. Here we have the Prince of Swords. And the swords deal with our mental processes, our thoughts. And when I think about the Prince of Swords, like attached to him are these kind of three minions in a way. So I think about this card as trying to like rein in your different thoughts and not to lose yourself in your thoughts because maybe a lot of things are going on. It's really important to, I think, still have faith and still be the person who you want to see out in the world. And again, I do think that America is going through a period of growing up. And part of that growing up that the country must do happens on the individual level. And we have to cut the shit, each one of us, we have to recognize our shit and, and figure out healthier ways to deal with our problems. And when I look at this card, again, these three guys that he is trying to rein in. And so I think this is about making sure that we are not losing control of our thoughts. And the Hanged Man. And when I think about this card, I think about you're kind of just staying in place. You're suspended. Like this is not a card of movement. This is a card of suspension. It is a card of reflection. There's snakes. Like when you look at this card, you see this man hanging up upside down, and then from his head, from his crown, you get this image of snakes. Snakes is about transformation, right? Because they shed their skin. They grow, they shed their skin. So this card is about that process in which before you transform, like being in a chrysalis, right? When the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis before it becomes a butterfly, we are in the chrysalis stage. And again, June is before July. And July, I think, is going to be a little bit of a firecracker. And so I think this is about, again, with the first card, it's taking stock. And this is about things are not changing, but you really need to think about in what direction do you want the future to be? Like, if, I don't say this, you don't want to destroy everything without a plan, because if you destroy everything without a plan, then it's very easy for someone who has a lot of power to come in and create an even worse system. You don't want to be worse off. So this is a time to think carefully about what it is to help craft the future of what you envision. All right. So overall, I think this is a very positive spread. So June again, maybe quite of a respite in comparison to the drama that we have had lately. Let's see what the Oracle says. So we have the paint can. And when I think about a paint can, I think about possibilities. I'm thinking about, well, that could be any color. I can paint this room any color. And recognizing that I have that ability to change my perception, to change my reality with a simple paint can. So this is kind of recognizing our agency. We can have the agency to make some changes. We can change a color. And the goat. The goat, when you look at this card, the goat is gnawing on this piece of this grain, right? And I think about that as representing processing. The goat is gnawing on this grain or whatever it is. And as he's processing that grain, he's gnawing on it, he is processing that food. So again, similar to the hangman and similar to the Queen of Discs, which I think are about reflection and processing. This card is also about processing. So again, I think the overall thing in June is really to understand where you are, what's going on, if you're America or not. Whatever happens in America does affect the world. And this month is really a time to be like, wait, where are we? What's going on? How much is that? Can I actually do this? And that, yeah, I do think this sun is going to be like, yeah, there are going to be some like good moments of June. I don't want to be a whole Debbie Downer, right? Like I do think that June will have some really great days. But I also think that this card could be like summer is going to be really intense here. Climate change, right? The heat. This is going to get more and more present. We're going to become more and more aware of this. All right. Well, that is my reading. That is this month's podcast. I have been talking a lot and it just turned 1 a.m. So I am going to brush my teeth and go to bed. But I needed, I always find that I much rather do this work at night. I have a hard time getting into the space during the day. I much rather it to be pitch black outside. That is my preferred setting. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Again, you can visit my website, thehouseofkanaz.com. And if you're interested in a reading or having any information about me, feel free to reach out and we will go from there. But if you've listened this long, thank you. And I will see you next time.